Well, good morning, and a big thank you to everyone here at Malloy. This company represents a commitment to engineering brilliance that is the hallmark of our defence industrial base. What you do here keeps our armed forces strong. It keeps Ukraine strong. And thank you to all our service personnel who are with us today. Being in the company again of those who step forward to serve is a great privilege of this job. Now, there's been no shortage of comments or speculation dedicated to this document. But we shouldn't lose sight of what the Defence Investment Plan is truly about. The measure of our security is the strength of those who defend it. The central purpose of this plan is to get the kit and technology that our armed forces need so they can fight and deter now and in the years ahead. Credit goes to the Prime Minister, and not only for getting us here today. On matters of national security, I've seen him make tough decisions, and always with conviction and assurance. Under his leadership, Britain has proved itself a reliable partner and a trusted ally. With our help, Ukraine's forces are still in the fight and fighting with determination and momentum. We were first out of the door to support a peace deal in Ukraine, same again to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He made the right choices on the issues that counted, and he also knows that in the end, it is our people that matter most. They win wars, they preserve. Now, life in the armed forces isn't always easy. And I know from personal experience what it can be like to raise a young family on the patch. It's often the small things that really make the difference. We've still got some way to go on improving service life, but I know that what we've done so far is really being felt and making a difference. Awarding 3 above-inflation pay rises, extending free childcare, and raising the standard of military families. Are supported. We will make them better prepared. This plan recognises the hard truth that the conflict in Ukraine completely upended the way of war. In response, taking the UK more money for hybrid Royal Navy, more money to increase the British Army's lethality, and more money for the next generation Royal Air Force. This plan reflects both the realities of future warfare and the principles that are safe for generations. And NATO. Now, I know that there is more work to do, and we've made a commitment to our allies as they did to us. And under this government, that promise will be met. Let me end by saying that our people remain our most important asset. A responsibility and every single member of our armed forces is as well as they serve us. Now, let me welcome someone who's been absolutely fundamental to this plan and to the funding supporting it. Please welcome the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
Hello, everybody, and it's a real honour to be here today. A few years ago, when I was Shadow Chancellor, I wrote and I spoke about the importance of security and resilience for economic growth, and also the importance of a strong economy for our country. It has become increasingly real and valid in my 2 years as Chancellor. Last year, I made the decision in the national interest to reprioritise aid spending towards defence and achieve the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. That was the right choice because the world has changed. national security is economic security. Today, we uplift defence spending further. An additional £15 billion worth of funding by, again, reprioritising spending across government. Last week, I was in Gdansk for the Ukraine Recovery Conference and in Kyiv, meeting the Ukraine Defence and Finance Ministers and innovative Ukrainian and UK businesses. I saw the amazing resilience and bravery of the Ukrainian people in the face of Russian aggression. I was humbled by their spirit and their stories. And I was reminded of why the work that we're doing today is so important. Because defence and readiness, for now, are not remote contingencies. They're not faraway possibilities. They are an immediate and pressing requirement. And by defending ourselves, we defend our allies and we defend our values. Our NATO partners, our Ukrainian allies and our European allies. I want to pay tribute to the Defence Secretary for all the work that he's done in just a few weeks to deliver today's Defence Investment Plan, and also to the Chief of the Defence Staff. They are prioritising the needs and fulfilling the responsibility of our country. I also want to recognise, Keir, how important you have been to this work right from the beginning. You'll hear from the Prime Minister in a moment. The defence of our country in an age of insecurity has been a defining pillar of his leadership, and his absolute moral clarity in the face of the threats that we face as a nation will go down as part of his legacy. So it is my honour to introduce my friend, our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you, Dan, and welcome to everybody here this morning. It's very good to see you, and particularly to see the representatives from our armed services here in the audience. And can I, through you, thank all of those who serve our country and have served our country. Let me say, standing here, it is really inspiring to see the work that you do here at Malloy, building capabilities like this workhorse drone being used in Ukraine, and this incredible heavy lift. I think that's the biggest drone I've seen, the heavy lift capability, which will soon be deployed to Ukraine. That gives you just a glimpse and a sense of what's going on the front line in Ukraine, which is so important. So thank you for all the work that's being done here, for the part that you are playing, together obviously with brilliant companies right across the United Kingdom in defence of our nation. And that is what I'm here to talk to you about today. And the first place is by saying this, that as Prime Minister, you get to meet people from all walks of life, up and down the United Kingdom. And I know how worried they are about the state of our world. They see the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East impacting on our stability, driving up the cost of living. And they're feeling tired at being at the mercy of events beyond our shores. We see countries that are arming and tensions that are rising, a more dangerous and volatile world than at any time for decades. We see the horrendous human toll of these conflicts, which cuts across our values of justice and sovereignty, and that simple British impulse that bullies and dictators cannot be allowed to push people around. We also know that these threats are not remote. We see foreign states targeting our nation as well. Thugs hired by foreign powers conducting violence, vandalism and arson on our streets. Disinformation aimed at sowing division and stoking disorder, spreading lies and undermining our democracy. Russian ships targeting the underwater cables that carry the data on which modern life depends. We also see on the battlefield in Ukraine that the very nature of conflict is changing before our eyes. Despite having a limited navy, limited traditional air power, and limited armour, Ukrainian forces have destroyed the Black Sea Fleet. They've struck deep into Russian territory and stopped the advance of one of the biggest armies in the world. Now, they've done that through sheer courage, yes, but also by embracing technology. They've integrated drones into their fighting like never before, understanding that the ability to innovate and produce at speed and at scale is more vital than ever to military power, and that AI will accelerate this transformation even further. Against that background, NATO is more vital than ever. Yes, we recognise that things have changed here too. While the US remains our key ally, I have been clear that in order to sustain NATO, the most successful military alliance the world has ever seen, European nations must take more primary responsibility for their own defence. These are the changes and the challenges which have defined my premiership and that will continue to shape our times. And look, my view has been the same since day one. We must stand more firmly on our own 2 feet. We must do what it takes to meet this new world head on, to keep our country safe and seize the opportunities that come from investing in our sovereign strength. That is what we're doing. That's why we have reversed at last the corrosive hollowing out of our armed forces. And it's why we're transforming a defence programme that, frankly, for too long has been underfunded and unsuited to the threats that we face. I've also been clear since day one that we do this not because we want war, but because we want to avoid war. We lived through Iraq. We learned from those mistakes, and we don't want to repeat them. I showed that when I chose not to join the war in Iran. We want our people to be able to live in a world defined by peace, stability, and the rule of law. But the paradox of peace is that when the world is arming and aggression is rising, the best way to avoid war is to prepare for it. The best way to defend is to deter, to have the strength to make your adversaries think again before they act. And that is what we are delivering. Last year, we published our Strategic Defence Review, setting out the capabilities we need for a changed world. And today, I am proud to publish our new Defence Investment Plan. This plan delivers on last year's review. But in a light of the rapidly changing world, the changing nature of conflict, and the imminent and growing threats we face, it goes further still. I want to thank the Defence Secretary and CDS here and the Chancellor for their work to sharpen and strengthen the plan in recent weeks. So we can set out today how we will transform our armed services, whilst also giving industry the certainty that they need to invest, and giving our allies clarity on our intent ahead of the NATO summit next week. This plan represents our best judgment of what the country needs to meet this moment, and it is a platform on which I know my successor will build. Now, unlike previous governments, we have taken care to fully cost this plan, examining the defence budget line by line. And that is vital, because it's how you expose the necessary trade-offs and expose the arguments that just don't stack up. You have some people in this debate who underplay the threat and deny the need to prioritise defence and security. You also have those who say you can fund defence without making sacrifices in other areas of capital spending. And you have those arguing that we can just raise borrowing, put it all on the never-never. But let's be clear, defence bonds are just borrowing by another name. We've looked at this very carefully. But the fact is, doing this through borrowing would push interest rates higher at a time when £1 in every 10 already goes on paying debt interest. And this government has fought hard to bring the public finances under control. And it has paid off, helping to bring inflation and mortgage rates down. We should not sacrifice that now. Because this is the point that often gets missed. Strong public finances are a fundamental part of our strength in this world. Lose control of them, we're not just poorer, we're much less secure. Slash funding to our public services in favour of defence, and we would be fundamentally weaker as a nation, more fractured as a society, less able to defend ourselves when our enemies prey on social division. So the hard truth is there are no easy answers. But the settlement I'm setting out today is the right choice for the country. It delivers the decisive action we need on defence in a way that is within our fiscal rules and that will not take resources away from day-to-day spending on frontline services like health and education. Instead, it is funded by reallocating spending from across government departments, reallocating capital budgets by 1 penny in every pound, while still maintaining public investment at the highest sustained levels since the 1970s. It means departments making better use of assets, like underused land. And it means those departments with the largest capital budgets contributing more. Therefore, some capital projects, for example on roads and energy, which are important but not immediately vital, will no longer go ahead as planned. But this is about taking the necessary choices, the right choices, to protect our nation. It is because we've taken these hard-edged decisions that we are able to increase our spending on defence. Now, we are already delivering the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the 1980s, £270 billion over the spending review period. And I can announce today that under the Defence Investment Plan, we are increasing this by a further £15 billion, setting a new record of spending almost £300 billion over the next 4 years to back our armed forces and strengthen our national security. Now, it's true to say there's been a huge focus on the numbers here, but let me take a moment just to set them out in a little bit more detail. Before we came into office, so 2 years ago, this country spent £54 billion a year on defence. We are taking this to almost £80 billion a year by 2029. That is a real terms increase of 27%. From spending 2.3% of GDP on defence in 2024, we are raising it to 2.7%, putting us on a trajectory to reach 3% in the next Parliament, which must be the #1 priority at the next spending review. At last year's NATO summit, I committed to spend 5% of GDP on our wider security, covering things like energy security and critical infrastructure, as well as defence. The Defence Investment Plan, published today, takes us to 4.2% under that commitment. By any measure, this is a huge historic shift for our nation and a legacy in which I take pride. And we must use this investment wisely, as I know that in the past, defence spending has sometimes been seen as a bottomless pit. People see the money going in, but they don't feel the benefits. So this time must be different. We can't just spend more, we've got to spend better. That includes driving real reforms within the Ministry of Defence to get greater value from our investment, accelerating innovation and procurement, and reducing non-military spending, for example, on civil service staff. We have examined every penny under this plan to make sure it delivers real, positive change for our country. And we can see that it will do so in 3 ways. First, it will make the British people safer. It focuses our resources squarely on the readiness of our armed forces, reversing the cuts of recent years, prioritising the availability of our forces and assets, rebuilding ammunition stockpiles, ensuring we are ready to fight and defend our nation and better prepared to win. It will also make the British people safer by driving a generational transformation of our armed forces, learning the lessons of Ukraine in order to modernise our military, equipped to fight the wars both of today and tomorrow. And we're backing this by putting in more than £5 billion into drones and autonomous weapons. That is the largest ever UK investment in this technology. That means we will build a new hybrid Royal Navy, so that when our frigates move to intercept a threat to British interests, like a Russian ship in our waters, for example, they will do so with outriders, uncrewed ships, above and below the surface, their AI systems working in unison with our warships, operating as a single integrated force. This will be joined by the next generation RAF, Typhoons flying with autonomous wingmen, making them invisible to enemy detection. And we will build an army that is 10 times more lethal, with attack drones flying alongside our Apache helicopters, a new fleet of surveillance drones collecting intelligence and finding targets, and a surge in low-cost one-way attack drones, which have proved so effective in Ukraine. On top of this, we are investing in long-range missiles, armoured vehicles, and counter-drone defence systems. We're investing in £500 million in new technology and capabilities for our commandos and our special forces, which are already the envy of the world. And we're investing £115 million to raise our defences against the threats of AI. This is about harnessing cutting-edge technology on every front to multiply our strength and defend our nation. Second, this plan will benefit the British people because it uses defence spending to strengthen our economy, creating almost 60,000 jobs. Now, our motto here is back British, with every pound spent wherever possible on backing British workers, businesses and innovators, delivering a defence dividend which brings SMEs and startups into the defence supply chain and pays off in every region and every community. And the fact is, defence jobs are different. They're high-skilled and well-paid. They offer career path, training, and a greater sense of meaning, the chance to step into our national story and play your part in full. That means pride in yourself and in your community. You know, towards the end of last year, I was up at the BAE plant in Wharton in Lancashire, and I met a young lad called Jack. He works there as an apprentice, following in his dad's footsteps. And because of the Typhoon contract that this government agreed, we didn't just secure his job, but his dad's job too, and that of the whole workforce. And it's in moments like that where you can see that someone's future has just opened up before them. That is what my politics has always been about. And that's what this investment will deliver. And to make sure that we keep winning contracts like that, I can announce today that we're creating a new £50 billion defence export facility to support British defence businesses to compete, to create more jobs, pride and opportunity up and down the country. That is the largest expansion of UK export finance support in its 100-year history, and a once-in-a-generation boost to the British defence industry. Third, this plan will benefit our nation because it enables us to strengthen our international leadership and build a more European NATO. Now, this is not to the exclusion of the US, but to strengthen the transatlantic alliance which keeps our country safe. This demands a decisive strengthening of European capabilities. That is why we're developing deep precision strike weapons with Germany. It's why we're building frigates with Norway to hunt Russian submarines when they come near our waters. And it's why we're going further on the Defence Investment Plan, allocating £400 million for the UK's contribution to the multilateral defence mechanism to finance and procure defence equipment with our allies and support a path to achieving our NATO spending targets. Moreover, we are renewing our commitment to build Tempest fighter jets with an £8.6 billion investment under the Global Combat Air Programme with Italy and Japan. Now, this is about developing sixth-generation stealth fighters that will secure our skies for decades to come and rebuild the foundation of a sovereign British aircraft industry. I can also confirm that we are bringing our investment in renewing our nuclear deterrent to £64 billion, a truly national effort, building new submarines, developing a new sovereign warhead, and buying 12 F-35A fighter jets, maintaining our role in guaranteeing British and European security, and leaving our country in a much better and stronger place than we found it. Now, before I finish, I just want to say a word about Ukraine. I think back to my visit to Kyiv at the beginning of the war and the horror I saw that day, the evidence of atrocities, photographs of murdered civilians, blindfolded, hands tied behind their backs, shot in the head. I heard the stories of the survivors, and I've carried that with me ever since. I swore to myself that I would do all I can to back Ukraine in this fight, because it is right and just, and because it's an attack on the liberties and freedoms that we have always fought for. And be in no doubt, the outcome of this war will shape our lives for decades to come. If Russia were to win in Ukraine, Putin would not stop there, but turn his gaze to other allies, bringing even greater instability to our continent, even greater impacts on our security and the cost of living, and an even greater need to mobilise yet more resources for our defence. But the good news is that Ukraine is holding strong. They are increasingly able to push Russia back on the battlefield. And there are clear signs that as Russia's losses mount and their economy struggles, the mood in Moscow is turning against Putin's war. So this is the moment to ramp up the pressure, backing Ukraine's defence and turning the screws on Russia's economy. And that is what we're doing. And the Defence Investment Plan will maintain our support in full. I have been proud to stand with Ukraine and with President Zelensky over the last 2 years, and to lead the coalition of the willing, together with France and Germany, to support a just and lasting peace, part of our work to restore Britain's standing in the world. It is a great credit to this nation that every Prime Minister since the invasion has stood full square behind Ukraine, and I have no doubt that will continue for as long as it takes. Because, look, moments like this ask fundamental questions of all of us. Not just about how we respond, but about who we are as a nation and who we choose to be. And I am clear, it is simply not in our nature to shrink in, resigned to mere passengers, buffeted by events. The Britain I believe in finds its greatness in these moments. In times of crisis, we stand tall. We summon that British spirit of grit and resolve and seize the moment with both hands, proud of our values, proud of who we are. And I see that greatness in the people I meet. I see it in the crews of our nuclear submarines that I've met coming off their long patrols. One man returning home to meet his 4-month-old baby for the first time. I see it in our troops defending NATO's eastern flank, in our Royal Marines protecting the northern frontier. I see it in our carrier crews, deterring Russia in the North Atlantic. I see it in our RAF pilots, putting themselves in harm's way to defend our allies in the Gulf. But I also see that greatness in all those who stand behind the front line. The workers in our NHS, our public services, our energy sector, our apprentices, engineers, building the technologies that we need, all of those on whom our national resilience depends. That's why I know we will continue to rise to this moment, not just to weather the coming storms, but to use this moment to reach towards a better future, the stronger, fairer country that the British people deserve, that I have sought to build. And this plan is a decisive step on that journey. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm now going to take a number of questions from the media, starting with Carl Dinnan from ITV. Carl.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Carl Dinnan from ITV News. You have said in the past that Russia could attack NATO as soon as 2030. Can you, hand on heart, say that this plan has enough in it by 2030 to deter if we can and to fight if we must?
Yes, I can. That is because of the increase in defence spending that we put in place, announced last year, already in place, which was the single biggest sustained increase since the 1980s, and the fact that this defence investment plan builds on that. And it's not just the amount of money, it is also the capabilities. We've learnt a lot from Ukraine, actually also from Iran as well, about the capability that is needed in order to confront countries like Russia. That is exactly what's going on in Ukraine. So I am confident in that. I'm also confident because we're working more closely with our European allies on this. One of the arguments I've made repeatedly over the last 2 years is that European countries need to do more. If we're to be persuasive in that argument, and I think we are and can be, UK needs to show a leadership role, to be a trusted ally, a country that is looked upon for leadership. And I believe we have built that, and that gives us the ability over the coming years to stand on that platform and work with our allies. That's why I was in Berlin last week with the E5 countries. It's why I'll be in NATO next week at the summit, working with all NATO members, and why I saw the Secretary-General yesterday, where we discussed this very thing. Thank you very much, Carl. Chris Mason from BBC News.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason at BBC News. One of the authors of the Strategic Defence Review, General Sir Richard Barrons, has said we're not keeping up with our allies and we're certainly not keeping up with our enemies when it comes to defence spending. Is he wrong?
Look, what I would point to is this, that we inherited an armed forces that were hollowed out. We have already taken, before today, the decision to put in the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the 1980s. That's for 45 years. So that gives you a sense of the scale and the urgency that we brought to this in just 2 years. This defence investment plan is now on top of that, a further £15 billion, in particular looking at the capabilities that we need. The Strategic Defence Review was really important. There are further things we've learnt even since then, looking at the development of the way in which wars are fought. Even these drones, I've been to Kyiv a number of times now, and each time I go, it is clear the capability is changing on a weekly and monthly basis. So we've put all of that thinking into this defence investment plan. Now, look, there will always be those that argue that even more should be spent, but I have to make the right judgments on the capability that I think is right for our country to meet the threats, not just of today, but of tomorrow. And that is what this defence investment plan does. I think anyone sort of standing back and objectively would say This is a massive step forward. If you take what we've already done, put the Defence Investment Plan alongside it, and the fact that it's strategic, it's not just funding today's capability, but tomorrow's capability as well, combined with the work that we've done to work with other countries on this, because the only way forward is to make sure that all Europeans step up together, and that requires us as a country to show the leadership that has been shown over the last 2 years and to have the ability to galvanise and bring other countries together. It is no coincidence that the two coalitions that have been set up in the last 2 years have been British-led. The coalition in Ukraine, which I set up with President Macron, and now Germany is a key leader in it as well. And then the other coalition to deal with the response to the Iran conflict, again, UK leadership alongside French leadership. And across Europe and beyond, other countries are looking to us to show that leadership and that resolve, and that's what we've been able to do. Thank you, Chris. Beth from Sky Sports, Beth Rigby.
Sky Sports. I wish it was. I wish it was. Thank you.
Sky News, Beth, not Sky Sports, but I'm sure you could do that as well.
One day. From the beginning of your premiership, you have prioritised Britain's role on the world stage, but your defence plan is a year late. It cost you your defence secretary and has no timetable for meeting the new NATO commitment. By getting it across the line, you have made a start to your legacy on defence. But do you acknowledge that it will be your successor who will need to secure it? And has Andy Burnham given you assurances that he will increase defence funding in the next spending review? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Beth. Let me just put it in this way. I think a test of any Prime Minister is whether they leave the country in a better state than they found it. And if you look at our country, that is undoubtedly a case on the economy, undoubtedly a case on public services, in particular the NHS, but also undoubtedly a case on defence and security and international leadership. We are in a much better state now than we were when we took over 2 years ago. And that isn't just measured in the amount of money we're putting into defence, the record investment that went in as a result of the announcement I made last year, the addition to that today, but also the fact that other countries now look to the United Kingdom as a leader on defence and security. We're the first to be consulted. We are the country that others want to work with. And I'm proud of that. We do leave the country in a better state. As for the future, I have no doubt that all Labour governments will remain that number one commitment to our defence and security. Labour governments have always done that and always will do that. And I'm absolutely certain, therefore, that this is a platform on which whoever comes after me can build, and I'm proud that it is, and I will do everything within my power to make sure that any transition is orderly and that we go from strength to strength, and that is what I'm endeavouring to do. Thank you very much, Beth. Andy Bell from Channel 5.
Thank you very much, Andy Bell, 5 News. Just to return to that point, Prime Minister, can you be a bit more explicit? Has Andy Burnham seen this plan before it's made public? Has he signed it off? Or is this very much your plan and you're just telling him you should stick to it?
Well, Andy, the way I put it is this. I don't think anybody would argue that the Strategic Defence Review was needed because any Prime Minister would want to know what are the capabilities I have at my disposal now, what are the capabilities I'm going to need in the future. The Defence Investment Plan builds on that by setting out what those capabilities will be, how they're going to be costed. So that is something which any Labour Prime Minister would want to stand behind. It's a platform any Labour Prime Minister would want to stand on, because the first duty of any Prime Minister is the defence and security of the country, the first duty, and I think everybody knows that and accepts that. What I will now do, and am doing, is to ensure that the transition to a new Prime Minister is orderly, with minimum disruption, and that there is a good, solid platform to build on. We've done that over the 2 years, and I shall faithfully do that in the remaining weeks, every day ensuring that we improve on the situation and that I can genuinely say, hand on heart, that I passed on a better country than one I inherited, and that I can make sure that my successor has every prospect of success, which is what I want more than anything. Thank you very much, Andy. I've got Paul McNamara from Channel 4, please.
Morning, Prime Minister. You keep on coming back to the line that you've increased defence spending by the largest amounts since the Cold War, and nobody's disputing that. But what former military chiefs and experts are arguing is that even with that, and even with the extra money, given the threats that the UK faces right now, it is still not enough, including General Sir Richard Barrons, who you entrusted to write last year's defence review. Are you willfully ignoring their advice, or do you just think these people with decades of war-fighting experience are wrong?
Well, I'm glad you began that by saying everyone acknowledges the huge increase we've put into defence spending, because it is important that we start there. The highest sustained increase since the Cold War, or since the 1980s, depending which way you want to measure it, that's nearly half a century. The biggest sustained increase for nearly half a century in the history of this country. That is a huge step forward, £270 billion over the spending review. With today's defence investment plan, that means that over the next 4 years, that will take it to a record 300 or nearly £300 billion. That is a huge amount of money. What we've done through the strategic review and the defence investment plan, which, as I say, has been sharpened even in recent weeks. And I'm very grateful to the Defence Secretary for all the work that he has done, the Chief of Defence Staff as well, alongside the Chancellor, to sharpen it, to make sure that, in a fast-moving world, it really is going to deliver the capability that we need for the future. And that is what it does. That is my judgment call on this. Of course, I hugely respect those with great experience and great service. There will always be those that say, whatever the sum is, frankly, it's not enough. Whatever sum I'd announced this morning, there would always be somebody who says that's not enough. I have a job as Prime Minister to get this judgment right in terms of the amount of money that is spent, the capability that we need as a country, and that is why I'm 100% confident in the plan that we've put forward this morning. I'm very pleased at the work that's been done in recent weeks to sharpen and strengthen this plan so it can be presented in the way it's been presented today. Thank you very much, Paul. I've got Tom Sables from BFBS Forces News.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Tom Sables, BFBS Forces News. As a Labour Prime Minister, you pledged £9 billion to upgrade 90% of military housing. Given that now there's reports that that money is being moved to fund the DIP, what's your message to military personnel living in substandard accommodation after your promises?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. Firstly, let me start by saying we have put a lot of money into military housing, and I'm proud that we have. It was very important that we did that. Alongside that, we have awarded 3 pay awards now, pay increases of above inflation. And again, I'm really proud that was the right thing to do, because it affects the morale, retention rates, and reflects the service that is given to this country by those that serve us. We will continue to do that. Of course, I have to balance that against investment in the military capability that we need. But in relation to the money we have put into the housing, in relation to the pay awards we have already made, I'm proud that we made those. We made it to reflect what we know our armed services give to our country, of which we are very thankful and very proud. Thank you very much, Tom. I've got Sophie Huskerton from the Daily Mirror. Sophie.
Hi, thank you, Prime Minister. So Andy Burnham has said he wants to stop departments spending too much time battling the Treasury instead of getting things done. The delay of your defence investment plan seemed like there was a bit of battling between the MOD and the Treasury. So what's your advice on Andy Burnham on this?
Well, let me just say a word or two about the Treasury and about this Chancellor, if I may. Because we inherited an economy that was broken. And there's no doubting that. Nobody argues about that. And this Chancellor put it on a stable footing. And you saw that in the figures earlier this year that were set out in the spring statement. They spoke for themselves. And you can see it every day, because what I see and what the Chancellor sees are the numbers that give us an indication of the impact of the conflict in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz on our country. The impact on our country, and less than it otherwise would have been, because our economy is stabilised. Look at the inflation rates across Europe. Look at our growth projected rates across Europe. So that is the work that this Chancellor has done, and I'm very proud of Rachel in relation to that. To have stabilised our economy in 2 short years after what we picked up means that I can depart the stage, because it's the end of my journey, it's not the end of anybody else's, but I depart knowing that we have left this country in a better state than we got it. Are there wranglings between departments and the Treasury? Yes, of course there are. There always have been, always will be, because at the end of the day, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have to look at the overall judgments for the government, the overall affordability, and prioritise between different things. Departments, of course, will put forward, in good faith, the commitments they think we should make. I understand that. But what we have to do is judge them against what we can afford, what the priorities of the country are. That's what we've done for 2 years. I'm really pleased that as a result of those judgments, our economy is stable and in a better place. That impacts people across the country hugely. That our public services are improving, particularly our NHS. And we're able today to announce this further investment in our defence and security. And I'm very proud of the fact, Rachel referenced that she went to Kyiv yesterday, that the standing of the United Kingdom in the world is in a much better place than it was 2 years ago. And I don't think anybody would really dispute that on defence and security and many other issues. Thank you very much. I've got Dan Martin from the Daily Telegraph. Dan.
Thank you, Prime Minister. How can you present this defence investment plan at the NATO summit when you're Prime Minister in name only? And also, Donald Trump wants you to meet this 5% target of GDP by 2035. Do you think that's possible for the UK? And what will you tell him at the summit?
I spoke to President Trump just 2 weeks ago when we were at the G7 together at great length about a number of issues, particularly the conflicts in Ukraine and the conflicts in Iran. And actually a very strong statement on Ukraine was put out from the G7, as you will have seen, showing the unity of that group of countries. This is additional investment today on top of the highest sustained increase since the Cold War, since the 1980s. I talked through Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General of NATO, talked him through this yesterday, talked to him very frequently on the phone as well as in person, have a very good relationship with him. He is very welcoming of what we are doing here today because he knows what a contribution it makes to NATO. He also appreciates, and we must never lose sight of this, of the huge contribution that the UK makes to NATO, not just as a leading advocate, a member of NATO, but of course we confirm our nuclear capability to NATO, which is an incredible capability, which keeps us and the whole of NATO countries safe. And I'm very proud that we do that. So I'm proud of that work. I'm glad. On the 5% commitment by 2035, today takes us to 4.2%. Towards that target. I will be very pleased to report that back to colleagues at NATO next week. They will be very pleased to discuss this with us, and I'm proud of the record I stand on in relation to defence and security as I go into that summit. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues.